When did you realize your family only viewed you as an ATM? That same afternoon, they threw a massive engagement gala for my brother. My mother texted me an invoice for $6,500 for the floral arrangements. You'll handle this, right? I showed up with a thick manila folder, dropped it onto the gift table, and smiled. You'll need a new fall guy. The chaos erupted almost instantly. The string quartet playing in the corner of the Oakwood Country Club ballroom didn't stop, but they definitely lost their tempo. The cellist dragged his bow harshly across the strings, a discordant screech that cut through the low murmur of wealthy guests. Trevor stood frozen. His champagne flute hovered inches from his mouth. His new fiancée, Nora, a woman he had known for exactly 3 months, frowned at the heavy manila envelope. She reached for it. Trevor panicked. He lunged forward and slammed his hand down over the clasp. Don't, he snapped. Nora blinked, pulling her hand back as if he had burned her. Trevor, what is it? It's his real resume, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the sudden vacuum of silence surrounding the gift table, it carried perfectly. My mother Diane materialized from the crowd. She was wearing a deep plum evening gown that cost more than my monthly rent, her face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and rage. She grabbed my elbow, her manicured nails digging into the cheap fabric of my blazer. Emily, what are you doing? Not here. You texted me the invoice for the flowers 20 minutes ago, I said, staring her down. I didn't shake her hand off. I just looked at it until she let go. I figured I should deliver my response in person. I looked past her. My 12-year-old son, Max, was standing by the coat check. He was still clutching the gold robotics trophy he had won just 3 hours earlier. He had spent 8 months coding, soldering, and building that machine in our cramped living room. No one from my family had come to the tournament. Diane had claimed she needed to help Trevor scout wedding venues in Napa Valley, but there was no scouting trip. They were here, drinking top-shelf liquor, celebrating a 30-year-old man who had never held a job for more than 6 consecutive months. Max was staring at his scuffed sneakers, trying to make himself invisible. Open it, Nora, I said. Trevor's grip on the folder tightened, his knuckles turning white. Emily, you're drunk. You're having an episode. Someone get her out of here. I'm a freelance corporate paralegal. Trevor, I said. You asked me to review your prenuptial agreement 2 weeks ago. You forwarded the draft from your primary email. You forgot to strip the cloud access links in the signature block. The color drained completely from Trevor's face. He looked like he was going to be sick right there on the polished hardwood floor. I clicked a folder marked Trust Assets. I continued, my voice dead calm. I found the digital paper trail. 12 years of bank transfers. 14,000 withdrawn from the college fund grandma left me, directly deposited into your trading account. 8,500 in medical bills mom and dad said they needed help with, matching the exact dates of your luxury trip to Dubai. 22,000 in personal loans I took out to save mom and dad's house from foreclosure. I paused, letting the numbers hang in the air, which actually went toward settling your cryptocurrency losses. $44,500. Trevor, my father, Conrad, stepped out from the crowd of onlookers. He looked tired, his tuxedo fitting a little too loosely around his shoulders. Emily, please, family matters shouldn't involve lawyers. We can talk about this at home. There is no home, Dad. Not for me. Not for Max. I pointed to the thick folder still trapped under Trevor's sweating hand. Inside that envelope are notarized affidavits, bank statements, IP logs, and a formal demand letter from my civil litigation attorney. I want the $44,000 returned immediately, plus interest. It also includes the formal police report I filed this morning for identity theft regarding the fraudulent loans. Diane gasped loudly, bringing a hand to her pearls. You called the police on your own brother? We protect our own, Emily. When did you ever protect Max? I asked. The question hung heavy and sharp. When he was hospitalized with asthma and you went wine tasting? Or today, when he won the state championship and you couldn't even send a text? I didn't wait for an answer. I turned my back on the pale faces of my family, walked over to the coat check, and put my hand gently on Max's shoulder. Are we leaving? He whispered. Yeah, buddy, we're done here. The drive back to our apartment was silent. The rain had started to fall, smearing the neon lights of the city across the windshield. Max sat in the passenger seat, his trophy resting securely in his lap. He ran his thumb over the engraved gold plate over and over again. Did Uncle Trevor steal from us? Max asked quietly, not looking up from the metal. Yes, I said. I didn't believe in softening the truth for him anymore. Softening the truth is what allowed my family to operate in the dark for so long. He took money that was supposed to be for your college, and money that was supposed to keep us safe. Are we going to be okay? We're going to be fine. I promise. By the time we walked into our apartment, my phone had 47 missed calls and 18 voicemails. I set my keys on the counter, made Max a plate of scrambled eggs and toast, and sat at the kitchen island to listen to the fallout. The first few voicemails were exactly what I expected. Diane screaming. You ruined the happiest night of his life. Nora left in a cab crying. Do you have any idea how much those caterers cost? Call me back right now, you ungrateful brat. The next few were from Conrad. His tone was different. Heavy, defeated, manipulative. Emmy, it's Dad. Look, your brother made some mistakes. We all make mistakes. But going to the police? That's going to ruin his life. He won't be able to get a job. He won't be able to marry Nora. I know you're hurt, but we need to keep this in the family. Please, just call off the lawyers. We'll figure out a payment plan. A payment plan. They had stolen $44,000, funded a lifestyle of country clubs and Aspen vacations, and my father wanted to put Trevor on a payment plan. I deleted the messages, powered down my phone, and went to sleep. At 8:15 am on Monday, my cell phone rang. It was my attorney, Silas Mercer. Silas was a shark in a cheap suit, a man who lived for paper trails and financial audits. Morning, Emily, Silas said. His voice was gravelly, backed by the sound of typing. I hope you had a restful weekend, because they didn't. What happened? I asked, pouring my first cup of coffee. I filed the demand letter and the identity theft report first thing Friday afternoon. The bank froze the joint accounts pending investigation. But Trevor didn't just sit on his hands over the weekend. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. What did he do? He tried to liquidate a secondary trust account, the one your grandparents set up for the grandchildren. He requested an emergency wire transfer of $12,000 to an offshore account in the Caymans on Saturday morning. Can he do that? Not anymore. The freeze caught it, but it shows intent to flee with assets. Here's the real problem, Emily. I spent Sunday digging into the routing numbers from the personal loans he took out in your name. He didn't just forge your signature. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? He had help, Silas said plainly. The IP addresses for the loan originations don't trace back to Trevor's apartment. They trace back to your parents' house. Your mother's desktop computer. Specifically, I stopped breathing for a second. The coffee mug in my hand felt impossibly heavy. My mother took out the loans? Your mother processed the applications. She knew all your security questions. Your first pet, the street you grew up on, your mother's maiden name. She bypassed the security protocols, secured the loans in your name, and then immediately transferred the funds to Trevor's crypto accounts. It wasn't just him, Emily. It was an organized effort. Before I could process the weight of that betrayal, Bell, a heavy knock echoed through my apartment. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. It was Conrad, my father. He was wearing his work coat, his shoulders slumped, staring at the floorboards of the hallway. Hold on, Silas, I whispered, keeping the phone to my ear. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open a few inches, leaving the chain engaged. Emily, Conrad said, looking up. His eyes were red-rimmed. Please, just 5 minutes. Did Mom send you, or did you come on your own? I asked. I came because we are a family, and our family is falling apart. He reached out, his fingers brushing the edge of the door frame. Trevor is a mess. Nora called off the engagement. She's moving her things out of his apartment right now. You won. You made your point. Now please, drop the police report. Mom committed wire fraud, Dad. She took out loans in my name from her desktop computer. Did you know? Conrad looked away. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. He didn't deny it. He didn't look shocked. He just looked ashamed. We had to. Emily, he muttered, his voice cracking. Trevor was in deep. He owed money to some bad people in the crypto exchanges. They were threatening him. You were always so good with money, so responsible. We knew you'd find a way to pay it off. We were going to tell you eventually. You let me work 60-hour weeks. You let me miss Max's childhood. You let me cry on your couch because I thought I was failing as a mother, all while you were funneling my credit to Trevor. I stared at him, feeling absolutely nothing but cold clarity. Get away from my door. Emily, if you don't drop this, your mother will go to prison. Then she better pack a warm sweater, I said, and slammed the door in his face. I locked the deadbolt and brought the phone back to my ear. Silas, I'm here, I heard, Silas said quietly. Good for you, but you need to sit down. I didn't call you just to tell you about your mother. I walked over to the kitchen stool and sat. What else is there? When I found the irregularities with your mother's IP address, I ordered a full, deep dive credit sweep, not just on you. I ran the entire household. Okay, Emily, you need to check Max's mail. The stuff you usually throw away as junk. Pre-approved credit card offers, that sort of thing. Max is 12, Silas, he doesn't get credit card offers. He does now, Silas said, and the grim tone in his voice made the blood rush out of my head. Trevor didn't stop with your social security number. Max has an active credit profile. It was opened 3 years ago, when he was 9. There are 3 maxed out credit cards attached to your son's social security number, and 2 of them have already been sent to collections. He's 12 years old, Emily, and he has $18,000 in defaulted debt. I didn't say anything. The silence stretched so long that Silas eventually cleared his throat. Emily, are you still there? Send me the files, I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded hollowed out, scraped clean of anything resembling panic or grief. I was just cold. I'm emailing the PDF now, Silas said, the sound of his keyboard clacking rapidly in the background. It's a synthetic identity setup. They used his social security number, but attached it to a slightly altered version of your parents' address, so the physical mail. The collection notices would bypass you entirely. I opened my laptop on the kitchen island. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were perfectly still. I pulled up my email and clicked the encrypted attachment Silas had just sent. 3 cards. Capital One, Discover, and a high-limit American Express. Look at page 4, Silas instructed. I scrolled down. It was the transaction history for the Amex. The dates lined up perfectly with the last 3 years. Charges at high-end steakhouses. Flights to Miami. A $4,000 charge at a boutique jeweler in downtown Chicago. Processed exactly 3 months ago. That's Nora's engagement ring, I whispered, staring at the screen. He bought the ring with his 12-year-old nephew's stolen identity, and the Discover card was used for living expenses. Silas added grimly. Groceries, gas, utility bills, things that point directly to your parents' address. They weren't just covering Trevor's debts, Emily. They were supplementing their own lifestyle. While I was clipping coupons, working overtime, and buying Max his winter coats from thrift stores, my mother was buying organic groceries and filling up her SUV on my son's non-existent credit. The betrayal was so absolute it felt physical, like a weight pressing down on my chest. I thought about the lockbox in my closet where I kept our important documents. When Max was in 1st grade, I had to work a massive corporate merger case. Diane had picked him up from school every day for a month. I had given her a spare key to the apartment in case of emergencies. She had access to everything. What do we do? I asked, my eyes fixed on the negative balances in bright red font. We escalate, Silas said. Identity theft against an adult is a felony. Identity theft against a minor, especially one you have guardianship over, brings in a whole different level of federal scrutiny. You need to take these reports to the precinct immediately. Add them to your existing file. This isn't just about civil litigation to get your 44 grand back anymore. This is criminal. I'm leaving now. Emily, Silas warned, his voice softening just a fraction. Once you hand this over to the police, you can't take it back. The state will pick up the charges. Your mother, your brother, they are going to face mandatory minimums if convicted. Are you prepared for that? I looked down the hallway. Max's bedroom door was slightly ajar. He was sitting on the floor, carefully polishing the gold plating of his robotics trophy with a microfiber cloth. He looked so small, so entirely focused on the one thing in his life he had earned purely on his own merit. I'm prepared, I said, and hung up. It took me 20 minutes to print the credit reports, organize them into a clean binder, and grab my coat. I told Max I had to run to the office for a work emergency, and that Mrs. Gable from down the hall was going to come sit with him. He just nodded, not taking his eyes off his machine. The police precinct downtown smelled exactly the way it always did when I had to drop off subpoenas for work, like stale coffee, wet wool, and floor wax. I walked straight to the front desk and asked for Detective Garrett, the officer who had taken my initial report on Friday. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a cramped interview room. Garrett walked in carrying my original manila folder. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, looking perpetually exhausted. Miss Voss, Garrett said, sitting down across from me. I was just reviewing your file. The bank confirmed the fraudulent loans originated from your mother's IP address. We were preparing to bring her and your brother in for questioning tomorrow. I slid the new binder across the metal table. You're going to need to update your questions. Garrett frowned, flipping the binder open. As he read the top sheet, Max's credit summary, his jaw tightened. He flipped to the transaction histories. The silence in the room grew heavy. He didn't ask me if I was sure. He didn't ask if there was a misunderstanding. The paper trail was too clean, too devastatingly obvious. Your son is 12? Garrett asked, his eyes still scanning the American Express statement. Yes, and these accounts were opened when he was 9. Yes, by my mother and my brother. Garrett closed the binder slowly. The professional detachment in his eyes had vanished, replaced by a hard, cold anger. Cops see a lot of terrible things, but stealing from a child's future usually crosses a universal line. I'll get a warrant for your parents' house and your brother's apartment, Garrett said. We'll confiscate the desktop computer and all their financial records. Given the flight risk your brother already demonstrated over the weekend, we'll move fast. Thank you, Detective. Miss Voss, he said as I stood up. I strongly suggest you block their phone numbers. All of them. When we execute these warrants, they are going to panic. You do not want to be on the receiving end of that. that. I nodded and walked out into the rain. I didn't block their numbers. I wanted to see it. I wanted to know exactly when their world collapsed. I went back to the apartment, relieved Mrs. Gable, and made dinner. Max and I ate in front of the television, watching a documentary about deep-sea marine life. It was peaceful. For the first time in years, the phantom pressure of my family's financial emergencies wasn't sitting on my shoulders. At 7:42 p.m., my phone lit up on the coffee table. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father or Trevor. It was an unknown number. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Hello? Emily? The voice was shaky, thick with crying. It's Nora. I muted the television. Nora, I thought you left Trevor. I did. I'm at my sister's place. She took a ragged breath. Emily, I'm so sorry. I didn't know about the money. I didn't know about any of it. He told me he was a venture capitalist. He told me the trust fund was his. I know you didn't know, Nora. You don't have to apologize to me. That's not why I'm calling, she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. When I was packing my things at his apartment yesterday, Trevor wasn't there. He was out trying to find a lawyer. I went into his home office to get my passport out of the safe. He had left it unlocked in a rush. My grip on the phone tightened. What did you find? It wasn't just your credit, Emily, she said, starting to cry again. There was a whole file box in the back of the safe, hundreds of pages. He didn't just steal from you and Max. He's been using other people's names too, and I think some of them belong to the clients at your law firm. I stopped breathing entirely. The documentary on the TV showed a jellyfish pulsing in the deep dark of the ocean, but the room felt like it was spinning. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. Nora, I said, forcing my voice to stay level. Listen to me very carefully. Are you absolutely sure? How do you know they were my clients? Because the files had the letterhead from your firm, she sobbed. Reed and Brennan Associates. I recognized the embossed logo. There were credit applications, mortgage documents, routing numbers, piles of them. Emily, he had them sorted by net worth. I just grabbed my passport and ran. How did he get them? The question slammed into my brain, but the answer followed a millisecond later, cold and sickening. Diane, the spare key. The afternoons she watched Max while I was working on major acquisitions. 5 years ago, before the firm fully transitioned to secure cloud-based servers, I used to bring physical intake files home to review. I kept them locked in a heavy metal filing cabinet in the spare bedroom, but the key to that cabinet was on the exact same ring as the apartment spare key I had given my mother. While I was at the office trying to earn enough to keep a roof over our heads, my mother was sitting in my apartment, opening my locked cabinet, photocopying my clients' confidential financial records, and handing them over to Trevor. They had turned my home into a data mining operation. Nora, I said, my throat dry. Did you take the files with you? No, she gasped. I was terrified. I just left them in the safe. The door is still open. Okay, you did the right thing. Stay at your sister's. Don't call Trevor. Don't answer if he calls you. The police are going to raid his apartment tomorrow morning, and you need to be completely separated from him when they do. I hung up before she could ask any more questions. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from the betrayal. It was pure, unadulterated terror. I immediately dialed Silas. It was past 8, but he answered on the second ring. I didn't bother with a greeting. I just told him exactly what Nora had found in the safe. For a long time, Silas didn't speak. The silence on the line was heavier than anything my father had offered at the door. When Silas finally spoke, the detached, aggressive confidence of a civil litigator was entirely gone. Emily, this changes everything, he said quietly. This isn't a domestic dispute over a hijacked trust fund anymore. If Trevor used client data stolen from your physical custody, your firm is liable. You are liable. We are talking about federal wire fraud, massive identity theft, and a catastrophic corporate data breach. The FBI will get involved. The state bar will investigate. You need to call Duncan Reed right now. Silas, if I tell Duncan, he'll fire me. If you don't tell him, and the police find those files in Trevor's safe tomorrow morning with your firm's logo on them, Duncan won't just fire you. He will sue you into oblivion, and the police will arrest you as a co-conspirator. You have to be the one to report it. You have to prove you are a victim, not an accomplice. He was right. I knew he was right. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at my phone. Duncan Reed was the senior managing partner at my firm. He was a ruthless, brilliant attorney who built his practice on ironclad discretion. Calling his personal cell phone at 9 o'clock on a Monday night to tell him his clients' identities had been compromised by my brother was professional suicide. I dialed the number. Duncan answered on the 4th ring. Emily, this better be a crisis regarding the Kellner merger. It's a crisis, Duncan, but not about Kellner. I swallowed hard. I need to report a severe data breach involving legacy physical files from 5 years ago. My family compromised them. I laid it all out. I didn't soften it. I told him about the trust fund, the fraudulent loans, the police report, and Nora's phone call. I spoke in the clear, objective terminology I used in my daily paralegal reports. When I finished, there was a long, terrible pause. I could hear the faint sound of traffic in the background on his end. Are you currently in possession of your firm-issued laptop and phone? Duncan asked. His tone was utterly devoid of emotion. Yes. Turn them off immediately. Do not access the firm's servers. You are suspended without pay. Effective this second, pending a full internal and external investigation. A courier will be at your apartment at 7 tomorrow morning to confiscate your devices. Do you understand? Duncan, I didn't know. I don't care what you knew, Emily. I care about exposure. If what you're saying is true, your brother has opened this firm up to millions in liability. Do not contact any clients. Do not contact anyone at the office. You'll hear from our outside counsel. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. In the span of 4 days, my family had stolen my inheritance, ruined my credit, destroyed my 12-year-old son's financial future, and now they had cost me the career I had spent 10 years building. I had no income. I had no savings left. I walked over to the couch, sat down next to Max, and pulled him into a tight hug. He leaned against me, his eyes still glued to the television screen. Are we okay, Mom? He asked, sensing the tension radiating off my body. We're going to be. I lied. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen island, staring at the front door, waiting for the sun to come up. At exactly 7:00 a.m., a grim-faced courier arrived and took my work laptop, my keycard, and my firm phone, sealing them in tamper-proof evidence bags. I signed the receipt, feeling like a ghost in my own life. At 9:30 a.m., my personal phone rang. It was Detective Garrett. Miss Voss, he said. He sounded breathless, the chaotic noise of a busy room filtering through the speaker. I thought you'd want an update. Did you execute the warrants? Simultaneously, 60 minutes ago. Garrett paused, and I heard a heavy door slam on his end. Your brother is in custody. It wasn't pretty. He tried to claim the safe belonged to his landlord, then he tried to say you gave him the files voluntarily. When we read him his rights, he threw up on his own rug. A dark, bitter satisfaction twisted in my stomach. And the safe? Was the box there? It was there. Hundreds of client files, just like your tip suggested. We've already handed that portion over to the Federal Cybercrimes Unit, but that's not why I'm calling you. My grip on the phone tightened. What about my parents? We hit their house at the same time. We confiscated the desktop computer computer, multiple hard drives, and a commercial-grade scanner in the basement. Garrett sighed, a rough, grating sound. Your mother was completely uncooperative. She demanded we wait for her attorney, then she tried to physically block my officers from taking the hard drives. Did you arrest her? We arrested both of them. Your father didn't say a word, just held his hands out for the cuffs. But Emily, Garrett's voice dropped, taking on a tone of genuine pity that made the hair on my arm stand up. We found something else in your mother's home office, a secondary lockbox. It was hidden behind some old photo albums. What was in it? Life insurance policies, Garrett said. 5 of them, all taken out within the last 3 years. I frowned, confused. Policies? On who? My father? No, Garrett said softly. On you, and on Max. The kitchen seemed to tilt. What? 5 separate whole life policies, Garrett repeated. 2 on you, 3 on your son. The premiums were being paid from the Discover card opened in Max's name. Your mother is listed as the sole primary beneficiary on all of them. The total payout value is just over $2 million. I stared at the wall, but I couldn't see the paint. I couldn't see anything. Fraud was one thing. Greed was one thing. A mother stealing from a daughter to fund her golden child's lifestyle was pathetic, but it was a crime of opportunity and entitlement. Taking out $2 million in secret life insurance on your daughter and your 12-year-old grandson wasn't just greed. It was a wager on our deaths. Emily, are you still there? I'm here. I know this is a shock, but you need to understand the implications of this. Given the massive debt Trevor and your mother have accrued, we're estimating close to $500,000 across all the stolen identities. They were desperate for a payout. People in that kind of debt, holding those kinds of policies, they start looking for ways to collect. Are you saying they were going to hurt us? I whispered. The word felt completely foreign on my tongue. I'm saying desperate people do terrible things, and your mother just insured your life for a fortune without your knowledge. I am officially advising you not to let anyone in your family near you or your son, even if they make bail. Do you have somewhere safe you can go? I looked around my cramped apartment. The locks on the doors were standard. My mother still had a key, though I planned to change the locks today. But she knew where I lived. She knew Max's school schedule. She knew my routines. No, I said. I don't. Pack a bag. Take your son. Go to a hotel, somewhere out of your immediate neighborhood. Do not post where you are on social media. I will call you when they are processed for the bail hearing. But you cannot be at that apartment tonight. I hung up and walked into Max's room. He was sitting on his bed, reading a comic book. He looked up, sensing the shift in my demeanor. Put some clothes in your backpack, buddy, I said, trying to keep my voice light. We're going to take a little vacation. A vacation? Where? Just a hotel downtown. It'll be an adventure. He didn't argue. He just nodded and started packing. He had learned a long time ago not to ask too many questions when I got that look in my eyes. An hour later, we were checked into a mid-range chain hotel near the airport, paid for with the last of the cash in my checking account. I sat on the edge of the stiff hotel bed, watching Max connect his tablet to the Wi-Fi. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It wasn't Garrett. It wasn't Silas. It was a text message from a number I didn't have saved, but the area code was local. Emily, it's Aunt Vivian. Diane used her one phone call from the precinct to call me. She's hysterical. She says the police are framing her and that you put them up to it. She gave me instructions to go to her house and get a green ledger from the attic before the police come back. I don't know what to do. What is going on? I stared at the screen. Aunt Vivian was my mother's younger sister. She was sweet, easily manipulated, and fiercely loyal to Diane. If my mother was using her one call from lockup to dispatch Vivian to retrieve a ledger, whatever was in that book was worse than the credit card fraud, worse than the client data breach, worse than the life insurance. I typed a reply as fast as my fingers would move. Vivian, do not go to the house. It is an active crime scene. If you remove anything, you will be arrested for tampering with evidence. 3 dots appeared, dancing on the screen. Then they vanished. A minute passed. 2 minutes. Vivian, please respond. Tell me you aren't going to the house. My phone rang. I answered it instantly. Vivian, listen to me. It's not Vivian. A man's voice said. It was smooth, calm, and completely unfamiliar. Vivian left her phone on the kitchen counter. I'm looking at your texts right now. My blood ran cold. Who is this? My name is Marcus Kellner, the voice said calmly. I believe your firm is handling a rather large merger for my family's company. I'm currently standing in your aunt's kitchen, and I think you and I need to have a conversation about what exactly your brother has been doing with my private financial records. How did you find my aunt? I asked, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. I turned my back to the hotel beds, walked into the cramped bathroom, and pulled the door shut behind me. I turned on the sink faucet just a fraction, letting the water run to drown out the conversation so Max wouldn't hear. I didn't have to look very hard, Marcus replied. The line was crystal clear, a stark contrast to the chaotic noise of Detective Garrett's calls earlier. Duncan Reed called me at 8:15 this morning. He gave me a very polished, very rehearsed speech about a contained legacy data breach involving a rogue former employee. He meant you, by the way. He told me the firm was handling it internally and that there was zero financial exposure. But Duncan is a liar, and he was sweating through the phone. So, I didn't wait for his internal review. I sent my own crisis management team to your mother's address. My stomach bottomed out. You sent people to my parents' house? I sent forensic accountants and private investigators. They arrived right as the police tape was going up. They watched a very nervous-looking woman pull up in a Honda Civic, take one look at the cruisers, and speed off. It took my team about 12 minutes to run the license plate and follow her back to her own house. I flew in from New York an hour ago. Vivian made me coffee. She's terrified. Emily, don't hurt her. She has nothing to do with this. She's just easily led. I have no interest in hurting Vivian, Marcus said, his tone entirely conversational, which somehow made it vastly more intimidating. She actually did me a favor. She told me all about the frantic phone call from your mother in county lockup. She told me about the green ledger in the attic. Since the police had sealed the main house, my team had a little chat with the detective on site. I have a lot of influence in this city, Emily. They went in, retrieved the ledger, and handed it over to me. I gripped the edge of the cheap hotel sink. Why would the police hand evidence over to you? Because it contains my proprietary financial data, and Duncan Reed's firm is already under investigation for negligence. The police know who I am. But here's the interesting part. I heard the distinct sound of thick, stiff pages turning. I'm looking at your mother's handwriting right now. I assumed this would just be a list of passwords, a record of Trevor's pathetic little gambling debts. But Diane is remarkably organized. She kept a physical log of every file she stole from your apartment. I didn't give them to her, I said, the panic finally bleeding into my voice. Marcus, you have to believe me. She had a spare key to my apartment to watch my son. She violated my lockbox. I didn't know. I know you didn't, Marcus said calmly. The water in the sink kept running. I stared at my pale reflection in the mirror. You do? Yes, because page 42 of this ledger outlines a very specific, detailed plan your mother had for ruining your career if you ever cut Trevor off financially. She wrote it out like a contingency plan. She knew exactly which of my accounts she she was leveraging, and she specifically noted how to plant evidence on your home network to make it look like you were the one feeding the data to offshore brokers. My knees went weak. I sank down onto the closed toilet lid. My phone pressed so hard against my ear it ached. My own mother. The life insurance policies were a passive bet on my death, but this was an active, premeditated blueprint to send me to federal prison. She had been holding my destruction in her back pocket for years, just waiting for the day I stopped being a compliant ATM. Why are you calling me, Marcus? If you know I'm innocent, why not just give the ledger to the police and let them deal with it? Because Duncan Reed is currently drafting a civil suit against you for $50 million, Marcus said flatly. I have people inside his firm. He is going to claim you orchestrated the entire breach. He is going to sacrifice you to save his reputation, and with the amount of money he has, his lawyers will drown you. You won't see daylight for a decade. Your son will end up in foster care, or worse, with whatever family you have left. The air in the bathroom felt too thick to breathe. What do you want? I want to gut Duncan Reed, Marcus said. The conversational tone vanished, replaced by a cold, surgical fury. I pay his firm millions a year for absolute security, and he let a paralegal take my physical files to a cheap apartment where a bored housewife photocopied them. I am going to destroy his firm. But to do that, I need to prove gross, systemic negligence on his part before this breach occurred. I need the internal memos. I need the security audit failures he buried last year. I need you. I'm locked out. Duncan confiscated my firm phone and laptop at 7 this morning. My access credentials are gone. I know, Marcus replied. But you've been his senior corporate paralegal for a decade. You know where the physical bodies are buried. You know which off-site storage facilities he uses to bypass digital discovery during audits. You know his blind spots. If I help you tear down my own firm, I'll be blacklisted. I'll never work in law again. If you don't help me, you'll be in a federal penitentiary by Friday, Marcus countered. Duncan is presenting his fabricated timeline to the state bar tomorrow morning. You are out of time, Emily. So here is my offer. You become my star witness. You guide my legal team through Duncan's shadow filing system. You give me everything I need to dismantle him. In exchange, my lawyers will represent you pro bono. We will provide the ledger to the authorities with the strict caveat of your total immunity. We will crush the civil suit Duncan brings against you, and I will personally ensure your mother and brother serve maximum sentences for what they did to my accounts. I looked at the bathroom door. On the other side was Max, sitting on a hotel bed with $18,000 of fraudulent debt attached to his name, his whole life derailed because of my family's bottomless greed. I had played by the rules my entire life. I worked the overtime. I covered the bills. I stayed quiet to keep the peace. And my reward was a mother who took out life insurance on my son and framed me for corporate espionage. Where do we meet? I asked. My car is pulling up to your hotel right now, Marcus said. A black Lincoln Navigator. The driver has a secure phone. You and your son get in. I'm putting you up in one of my corporate suites downtown. It has private security. Your family won't be able to get within a mile of you. And Duncan Reed's private investigators won't be able to serve you with a subpoena. How did you know what hotel I was at? I asked, a chill running down my spine. Emily, you paid for it with your debit card. You are currently the center of a massive financial security breach involving my money. You've been tracked since the moment Duncan called me. Bring the boy. The car is waiting. The line clicked dead. I stood up, turned off the faucet, and took a deep breath. My reflection in the mirror looked older, harder. The woman who had meekly handed over her credit card for Trevor's emergencies was dead. The woman who had let Diane berate her at family dinners was gone. I opened the bathroom door. Max looked up from his tablet. Pack up, buddy, I said, grabbing my own coat. We just got here, he said, frowning. Is Mrs. Gable coming? No, we're moving to a nicer place. A much nicer place. We walked out to the rain-slicked parking lot. The black Lincoln Navigator was idling right by the main entrance. A driver in a dark suit stepped out and opened the rear door for us. He didn't say a word. Max climbed in, his eyes wide as he took in the plush leather seats and the tinted windows. I slid in next to him. The moment the doors closed, a secure tablet mounted on the partition lit up. It was a video call. Silas Mercer's face appeared on the screen. He was sitting in what looked like a massive, glass-walled conference room, looking completely out of his element. Emily, Silas said, adjusting his cheap tie. I assume you're in Kellner's car. Silas, what are you doing? Working for Marcus Kellner, apparently. Silas said, letting out a short, nervous laugh. His people showed up at my office 20 minutes ago. Offered to buy out my entire firm's caseload for the year if I joined his legal team as your dedicated advocate. I'm sitting in the Kellner Enterprises boardroom right now. The coffee here costs more than my car. He bought my lawyer? He bought your safety, Silas corrected, his face turning serious. Emily, I just saw Duncan Reed's initial filing. It's worse than we thought. Duncan isn't just claiming you leaked the files. He's claiming you actively colluded with Trevor to short Marcus's stock. He fabricated emails. Emily, he had his IT department generate timestamps showing you logging into the restricted servers at 2 a.m. on weekends. He is completely fabricating a criminal conspiracy. A cold rage settled in my chest. Duncan was a creature of pure self-preservation. He would destroy a single mother to save his quarterly earnings without blinking. We have the ledger, I told Silas. Marcus has my mother's handwritten notes detailing how she set me up. I know. Kellner's general counsel just showed it to me. But it's not enough to stop Duncan's civil suit. A handwritten ledger from a known fraudster could be argued away as the ramblings of a desperate woman. To stop Duncan, we need the kill shot. Kellner said you know where Duncan keeps the off-book audits. I leaned back against the leather seat, staring out the tinted window as the hotel disappeared behind us. I thought about the 10 years I had spent at Reed and Brennan Associates, the late nights drafting NDAs, the weekends organizing discovery boxes, the way Duncan would look right through me in the hallways, treating me like a piece of furniture that occasionally generated billing hours. There's a storage facility in Oak Brook, I said slowly, the details crystallizing in my mind. It's not under the firm's name. It's leased under a shell LLC called Blue Horizon Holdings. Duncan uses it to store physical copies of the internal compliance audits he runs on his own partners. Whenever the firm fails an internal security sweep, he has the digital copies wiped and moves the physical reports there so they can't be subpoenaed in standard digital discovery. Silas started typing frantically off screen. Blue Horizon Holdings, Oak Brook. Are you sure? I organized the boxes myself 3 years ago, I said. Box 402 specifically, it contains the compliance failure report from when the firm transitioned to the new cloud servers. It explicitly states that the legacy physical files, the exact files my mother stole, were never properly logged or secured. Duncan signed the report. It proves he knew the vulnerability existed for years and did nothing. If we get that box, Silas said, his eyes lighting up, Duncan's entire narrative collapses. It proves he's perjuring himself to cover his own negligence. There's a problem, I added. The facility requires a physical keycard and a biometric scan to access the unit. Only Duncan and the senior partners have them. The video feed split. Marcus Kellner's face appeared next to Silas's. He was sitting in the back of a different car, the dark city street rolling past his window. That's not a problem, Emily, Marcus said. I own the building in Oak Brook. I own the management company that leases those units. I can have the doors open in 20 minutes, but I need you there to identify the exact boxes. I am not having my people tear through a storage unit blindly and risk Duncan claiming we planted the evidence. I looked at Max. He had put his headphones on and was playing a game on his tablet, completely oblivious to the corporate warfare happening in the seats next to him. I have my son with me, Marcus. I'm not taking him to a raid on a storage unit. The driver will take the boy to my private residence, Marcus said. My head of security and my wife are there. He will be safe. I have a second car waiting for you at the next intersection. You switch cars, come to Oak Brook, and we end Duncan Reed tonight. It was a terrifying proposition, handing my son over to a billionaire stranger's staff. But what choice did I have? The police had my parents. Duncan had my career. My brother had my money. This was the only play left on the board. Okay, I said. Do it. 5 minutes later, the navigator pulled over to the curb. A sleek gray sedan was waiting directly behind it. I took Max's headphones off. Hey, I need you to go with the driver for a little while. He's going to take you to a really nice house. I have to go do some work with Silas, okay? Max looked at the driver, then at me. His eyes were entirely too old for his face. Are you going to get Uncle Trevor? Uncle Trevor is already gone, buddy, I said softly. I'm going to make sure he can never come back. Max nodded once. He didn't cry. He just settled back into his seat. Okay, Mom. I stepped out into the freezing rain and got into the gray sedan. The driver immediately pulled out into traffic, heading west toward the suburbs. Marcus Kellner's voice came through the car's speakers. We're 10 minutes out from the facility, Marcus said. Duncan's lawyers just filed the preliminary injunction. They are moving fast. They want your bank accounts frozen by morning to starve you out. Let them freeze them, I said bitterly. Trevor already drained them. When we pulled into the massive industrial park in Oak Brook, the rain had turned into a steady, freezing downpour. The storage facility was a fortress of concrete and steel, surrounded by razor wire. There were 3 black SUVs parked near the main loading dock. I stepped out of the car. Marcus Kellner was standing under a massive umbrella held by an associate. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed, with eyes that looked like they had never missed a detail in his life. Emily, he said, nodding. He gestured toward the open loading bay doors. Lead the way. We walked down a long, stark white corridor lined with heavy steel doors. 2 of Marcus's private security men walked ahead of us, carrying heavy flashlights and bolt cutters. When we reached Unit 804, one of the men swiped an override card and the massive steel door rolled upward with a deafening rattle. Inside, it looked like a library of secrets. Hundreds of identical bankers' boxes were stacked floor to ceiling on heavy metal shelving. Aisle 4, I said, walking down the rows. The smell of dust and old paper filled the air. Bottom shelf. I stopped in front of a stack of boxes marked only with alphanumeric codes. I pulled the top box down and set it on the concrete floor. Box 402. I popped the lid off. Inside were thick, bound reports. I pulled the first one out. The title page read, Internal Security Audit and Compliance Review, Reed and Brennan Associates. I flipped to page 17. There it was. Duncan's signature, directly beneath a paragraph explicitly stating that the physical intake files from 2018 to 2021 had never been digitized, secured, or relocated to the firm's central vault, posing a critical vulnerability to high net worth client data. I handed the binder to Marcus. He read the paragraph. A slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. He knew. Marcus whispered. He knew for 3 years, and he still billed me for maximum security compliance. That's the kill shot, I said, my voice echoing in the empty unit. Suddenly, the heavy sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor outside the unit. Marcus's security guards instantly stepped between us and the open doorway, their hands resting near their waistbands. A man stepped into the light of the corridor. It wasn't the police. It was Duncan Reed. He was soaking wet, his expensive trench coat plastered to his shoulders. He looked wildly out of breath, his face pale and slick with rain. Behind him stood 2 massive men who clearly weren't lawyers. Marcus, Duncan said, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. He forced a smile, but his eyes were darting frantically to the open banker's box at my feet. What a coincidence. I received an alert that the master override had been triggered for my unit. I didn't realize my landlord was taking a midnight tour. Marcus didn't flinch. He just held up the bound audit report. You're done, Duncan. Duncan's eyes snapped to me. The sheer venom in his stare made me take a step back. Emily, you stupid, ungrateful bitch. You have no idea what you've just done. You think violating your non-disclosure agreement to help him is going to save you? I think my non-disclosure agreement doesn't cover fraud, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Duncan took a step forward, but Marcus's security guards mirrored him, blocking the entrance completely. Marcus, listen to me, Duncan pleaded, the arrogance suddenly draining out of him. She set this up. Her brother took the files. She's manipulating you. Her mother kept a ledger, Marcus replied, his voice colder than the rain outside, detailing exactly how they stole the keys and framed her. And this document, he tapped the binder, details exactly how you left the door wide open. You lied to me, Duncan. You lied to my board. You tried to ruin an innocent woman to cover your own incompetence. Duncan's face crumpled. He looked at the 2 men behind him, but they didn't move. They were firm muscle, but they weren't going to fight a billionaire's security detail in a storage unit. I can fix this, Duncan stammered. We can settle this quietly. I'll waive the fees for the merger. I'll fire the entire IT department. By tomorrow morning, I will have filed this audit report with the State Bar, the SEC, and the Federal Cybercrimes Unit, Marcus said. I am going to strip your firm down to the studs. I will make sure you never practice law in this country again. You can't do this to me, Duncan screamed, the sound cracking halfway through. I built that firm. You built it on a lie, I said. Duncan lunged. It wasn't a calculated move. It was pure, desperate panic. He tried to shove past the guards to get to the box. One of Marcus's men simply caught him by the shoulder, spun him around, and shoved him hard into the concrete wall of the corridor. Duncan hit the wall with a sickening thud and slid down to the floor, gasping for air. Let's go, Emily, Marcus said, not even looking down at his former lawyer. We walked right past Duncan Reed, who was sitting on the dirty concrete, his expensive suit ruined, clutching his ribs. He looked exactly like Trevor had when he realized the money was gone. Small, pathetic, powerless. When we got back to the cars, my phone vibrated. I pulled it out. It was Detective Garrett. Miss Voss, Garrett said. His voice was heavy. We have a massive problem. I stopped with my hand on the door handle of the sedan. What happened? You have my parents and my brother in custody. We did, Garrett said. 10 minutes ago, your father made bail. But that's not the issue. The issue is who paid for it. Who? Your ex-husband, Garrett said. David. The ground seemed to drop out from under me. David, Max's father. The man who had walked out on us 8 years ago, who hadn't paid a dime of child support, who hadn't called on a single birthday. Why would David bail out my father? I breathed. Because according to the paperwork filed by his attorney, Garrett said slowly. David just petitioned the court for emergency, full custody guardianship of Max, citing your current suspension from your law firm, your lack of permanent residence, and the fact that your son has $18,000 of debt under his name while in your care. He's claiming you are entirely unfit. Emily, he's coming for your son. The rain kept falling, soaking through my coat, but I didn't move. I just pressed the phone harder against my ear, trying to make sense of the words. David hasn't seen Max since he was 4 years old, Garrett, I said, my voice eerily flat. He hasn't paid a dime of child support in 8 years. He tends bar at a dive in the South Loop and lives in a studio apartment. He doesn't have the $10,000 in cash it would take to post my father's bail, and he certainly doesn't have the retainer for a family law attorney. I'm looking at the filings right now, Emily, Garrett said. The emergency custody hearing is set for 9 a.m. tomorrow at the Daily Center. He's citing the $18,000 in delinquent debt attached to Max's social security number as proof of your financial neglect. And because you just lost your job today and vacated your apartment tonight, he's claiming you're a flight risk who can't provide a stable home. How did he even know about the debt? We only found out this morning. Your father, Garrett replied heavily. Conrad was allowed to make calls while waiting for processing. He didn't call a bail bondsman. He called David. Emily, they're pooling their resources. If David gets custody of Max, you lose your leverage. You become an unfit mother facing a mental breakdown. It discredits every claim you're making against your family. I'm not letting him take my son. Then you need to be at the Daily Center at 9 a.m. And you better bring a damn good lawyer. Garrett hung up. I stood in the freezing rain for a few seconds, letting the cold seep into my bones. Then I turned around and got back into the gray sedan. Silas and Marcus were waiting. Marcus was already wiping the rainwater off the leather-bound audit report with a microfiber cloth. Trouble? Marcus asked, not looking up. My ex-husband just bailed my father out of jail, I said. He filed for emergency full custody of Max. The hearing is tomorrow morning. Silas stopped typing on his tablet. He slowly lowered it to his lap. David, the guy who ran off to Vegas with a cocktail waitress when Max was in preschool? Yes, Silas frowned, his legal mind immediately dissecting the logistics. An emergency ex parte custody filing requires an immediate retainer. Family court judges don't grant next-day hearings unless a top-tier firm fast-tracks the paperwork. Who is representing him? I don't know, I said, my voice finally beginning to shake. But Garrett said they cited the debt on Max's credit report. They're using my mother's fraud against me. Marcus tapped his fingers against the armrest. He looked out the window at the storage facility, then back to me. It's Duncan, he said simply. Duncan? Silas asked. Why would Duncan Reed care about a custody battle? Because he is a cornered animal, Marcus said, his voice entirely devoid of pity. Think about it. I am about to file an SEC complaint and a state bar grievance that will dismantle his firm. His only defense is to claim Emily is a rogue, unstable employee who orchestrated the data breach herself. What is the fastest way to prove she's unstable? Have a family court judge declare her an unfit, financially negligent mother, and take her child away. Duncan is funding your ex-husband's legal fees. Emily, the sheer, suffocating weight of it pressed down on my chest. They were all working together now. My father had traded his own grandson to David just to get out of a holding cell. Duncan was using my broken marriage to save his corporate empire. I was surrounded by men who viewed my life as nothing more than collateral damage. Take me to Max, I said. Marcus nodded to the driver. Take us to the house. The drive to Marcus Kellner's private estate took 40 minutes. We passed through massive wrought iron gates in the northern suburbs, pulling up to a stone mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. The driver let us out, and Marcus led me through a cavernous foyer into a sprawling, wood-paneled library. Max was sitting at a massive mahogany table. A woman in a dark uniform had just set a plate of grilled cheese and a glass of milk in front of him. He looked incredibly small in the grand room, his tablet pushed to the side, his legs swinging a few inches above the floor. Mom, he said, his face lighting up with relief when he saw me. Hey buddy, I said, walking over and pulling him into a hug. I kissed the top of his head, breathing in the scent of his cheap strawberry shampoo. Are you okay? Did they take good care of you? Yeah, the chef let me pick whatever I wanted. He looked past me, noticing Marcus and Silas standing near the doorway. Did you finish your work? I pulled a chair out and sat down next to him. I folded my hands on the table. I had promised myself I wouldn't soften the truth anymore. Max, I need to talk to you about something important, and it's not going to be easy. He stopped swinging his legs. He looked at the grilled cheese, then pushed the plate away slightly. Is it about Grandma? No, it's about your dad. Max blinked. The mention of David was so rare in our lives it was like bringing up a ghost. He didn't have any happy memories to cling to. His only real memory of David was from his 6th birthday, waiting on the front steps of our old apartment building for 3 hours in the cold because David had promised to take him to the zoo. He never showed up. What about him? Max asked, his voice tight. He's back in the city, I said softly, and he's trying to tell a judge that he should be the one taking care of you. Max stared at me, completely still. Why? He doesn't even like me. The honesty of a 12-year-old is a brutal thing. It cut right through the legal maneuvering and the corporate sabotage. Because some people who are very angry with me are giving him money to say it, I explained. They want to make me look like a bad mother, so they're using him to do it. Tomorrow morning I have to go to court and fight him. Max looked down at his hands. Do I have to go with him? Absolutely not, I said, my voice hardening into iron. I will burn this entire city down before I let him take you anywhere. But I need you to know what's happening. I need you to stay here tomorrow with Mr. Kellner's security team while I go to the courthouse. Max nodded slowly. Okay. He picked up his glass of milk, his hands trembling just slightly. Mom? Yeah? If he doesn't want me, and Grandma doesn't want me, he swallowed hard. Why does everyone keep trying to use me? I closed my eyes. The tears I had been holding back for 4 days finally broke, spilling hot and fast down my cheeks. I leaned over and wrapped my arms around him, burying my face in his shoulder. I want you, I whispered fiercely. You are the only thing in this world I care about, and I am going to make them pay for every single thing they did to you. I promise. I stood up and wiped my face. I walked out of the library and into the hallway, where Silas was leaning against the wall, reading something on his phone. We need a strategy, I said, my voice thick but steady. I've got one, Silas said, pushing himself off the wall. I just checked the court docket. David is being represented by Eleanor Vance. She's a senior partner at Arison Thorne. She charges $800 an hour and doesn't take cases unless a wire transfer clears her account in full before she prints the paperwork. So Marcus was right. Duncan is paying her. Yes, but family court doesn't care who pays the bills, Emily. The judge is going to look at the facts on paper. The facts are, you are unemployed. You have no permanent address. Your son has 18 grand in collections. And your ex-husband suddenly looks like a concerned, stable citizen. He tends bar and lives in a studio. Eleanor Vance will have an answer for that, Silas warned. She'll say he just signed a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment. She'll say he has a new management job. Duncan has the capital to fabricate an entire life for David overnight. point. We can't just walk in there and call him a deadbeat. We need to destroy his credibility. How? Silas smiled, a sharp predatory grin that made him look completely at home in his cheap suit. By using the very thing your mother tried to kill you with, the life insurance policies. I frowned. What do you mean? David was married to you, Silas said, pulling up a digital notepad on his tablet. When you divorced, part of the standard settlement required him to maintain a baseline life insurance policy with Max as the sole beneficiary, correct? Yes, but he let it lapse 6 months after the divorce. He stopped paying the premiums. Exactly. But your mother recently took out 3 whole life policies on Max. Silas tapped his screen. If David is working with your father, and your father is trying to protect your mother, I guarantee you David's lawyer is going to try to claim that David was the one who funded those policies. They're going to use the fraud to make him look like a responsible father who was saving for Max's future, while framing you as the negligent one. That's insane. The premiums were paid from the stolen Discover card, which was in Max's name, routed to your parents' address. Silas countered. It's muddy enough for a slick lawyer to spin. But here is where they overplay their hand. If David steps up in front of a judge tomorrow and swears under oath that he is financially responsible for Max, and that he contributed to those policies, I saw it. The legal trap snapped into focus in my mind. Then he's committing perjury. But more importantly, if he claims financial solvency, he owes me 8 years of back child support. Exactly, Silas said. We don't just defend you tomorrow, Emily. We go on the offensive. We let him dig his own grave, and then we bury him in it. The next morning, the air in the Daily Center courthouse felt heavy, smelling faintly of stale coffee and anxiety. I walked through the metal detectors with Silas by my side. I was wearing my best conservative suit, the one I usually saved for appellate court filings. I hadn't slept. I had spent the night reviewing 8 years of David's non-existent financial records. We took the elevator to the family court division on the 10th floor. The hallway was crowded with arguing couples, crying children, and bored attorneys looking at their watches. I spotted him immediately. David was standing near the double doors of courtroom 104. He was wearing a navy blue suit that looked brand new. The tags probably cut off an hour ago. He had shaved his scruff and slicked his hair back. He looked exactly like the man I had married. Charming, polished, and completely hollow inside. Standing right next to him was my father. Conrad looked terrible. His skin was sallow, and he was leaning heavily on a cane I hadn't seen him use in years. When he saw me walking down the hall, he had the nerve to look away, staring intently at the scuffed linoleum floor. Keep your eyes forward, Silas muttered to me. Let them sweat. But David didn't sweat. As I approached, he offered a sad, condescending smile. He stepped right into my path. Emily, David said, his voice dripping with practiced sympathy. I'm sorry it had to come to this. I really am. But I have to do what's best for my son. He's not your son, I said, stopping a few feet away. You lost the right to call him that when you walked out. People change, David said, placing a hand on his chest. I've gotten my life together. I've got a good job now. A nice place in Lincoln Park. When Conrad called and told me what was happening, the debt, the fact that you got fired, I couldn't just stand by. I looked past him to my father. How much did Duncan Reed pay you to sell out Max, Dad? Was it enough to cover Trevor's crypto losses? Or did you hold out for a little extra? Conrad flinched. Emily, please. Your mother is sitting in county jail right now. She's terrified. Trevor is facing federal charges. I had to do something to stop the bleeding. David is going to take Max for a little while until you drop the civil suit against the firm and the police reports. Then we can go back to normal. He said it with such casual entitlement. Back to normal. Normal meant me carrying the weight of the world while they drained my accounts. Before I could answer, the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom opened. A bailiff stepped out. Case number 2026 F419. Voss versus Voss. Judge Halvorson presiding. David's lawyer, an intimidating woman in her 50s with sharp features and a severe gray bob, stepped out from the crowd and motioned for David to follow her inside. Eleanor Vance. Silas was right. She moved with the quiet arrogance of someone who knew the game was rigged in her favor. We walked in and took our seats at the respondent's table. The courtroom was empty except for us. Judge Halvorson, a stern-looking man in his late 60s with heavy bags under his eyes, sat behind the bench, reading the file. All right, Halvorson said, his voice echoing in the large room. I have an emergency ex parte petition for a change of custody, filed by the petitioner, David Voss. Miss Vance, this is highly unusual. The petitioner hasn't exercised visitation in nearly a decade. Why the sudden emergency? Eleanor Vance stood up, adjusting her glasses. Your Honor, Mr. Voss only recently became aware of the severe and immediate danger to his child's welfare. Yesterday, the respondent, Emily Voss, was terminated from her employment at Reed and Brennan Associates for suspected involvement in a massive corporate data breach. Objection, Silas said smoothly, half standing. My client was suspended pending an investigation, not terminated, and no formal charges have been filed against her. Noted, the judge said. Continue, Miss Vance. Furthermore, Vance said, her voice rising to fill the room. Mr. Voss discovered that the respondent has severely mismanaged the minor child's identity. Attached to Exhibit A is a credit report showing $18,000 of defaulted debt taken out under the 12-year-old child's social security number. The respondent was the sole guardian during this period. We submit that she is either criminally negligent or actively engaged in identity theft against her own son. Mr. Voss, who has recently secured a managerial position in logistics and leased a family-appropriate residence in Lincoln Park, is stepping in to rescue his child from this toxic environment. The judge frowned deeply, looking at the credit report. $18,000 in debt on a minor. That is severe, Miss Voss. Silas stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't perform for the room. He just looked at David. Your Honor, the debt was accrued fraudulently. Yes, but not by my client. We have police reports filed yesterday morning proving that the debt was originated from the IP address of Emily's mother, Diane, who is currently in custody for the crime. However, since opposing counsel has brought up financial responsibility, Silas paused, letting the silence hang. We would like to ask Mr. Voss a few questions under oath regarding his sudden financial stability. Judge Halvorson nodded. Proceed. Silas walked around the table, approaching David. Mr. Voss, your counsel claims you are deeply invested in your son's financial future. Is that correct? Yes, David said, sitting up straighter. I am. And you have the means to provide for him? I do. I manage a logistics firm. Fascinating, Silas said. He pulled a piece of paper from his folder and handed it to the bailiff to pass to the judge. Your Honor, this is an affidavit from the owner of Logistics Pluses, a moving company in the South Side. Mr. Voss does not manage it. He was hired 4 days ago as a dispatcher. Furthermore, the Lincoln Park apartment on his lease is a corporate short-term rental, paid for in advance by a Shell LLC, traced back to Duncan Reed, the senior partner at Emily's former law firm. Eleanor Vance jumped to her feet. Objection. Relevance. It goes entirely to credibility, Your Honor. Silas shot back. But let's look at the actual finances. Mr. Voss, you claim you want to protect Max. In the last 3 years, did you ever contribute financially to his welfare? David hesitated. He looked at Eleanor Vance, who gave him a very subtle, almost imperceptible nod. She was guiding him into the trap Silas had predicted. Yes, David said firmly. I paid for his life insurance premiums. The courtroom went dead silent. Even my father, sitting in the gallery, went pale. You paid the premiums on the 3 whole life policies recently discovered by the police? Silas asked, his voice deadly quiet. Yes, David lied smoothly. I wanted to make sure he was provided for. Emily was irresponsible, so I handled it quietly. Silas didn't smile. He just turned to the judge. Your Honor, Silas said. We have the bank statements from the fraudulent Discover card used to pay those exact premiums. The card was opened using the child's stolen identity. If Mr. Voss is testifying under oath that he paid those premiums, he is confessing to felony identity theft and wire fraud on the record in your courtroom. David's smug expression completely evaporated. He looked at Eleanor Vance, sheer panic flashing in his eyes. Withdraw the statement, Vance hissed, forgetting to address the judge. Too late, Silas said. But let's assume he's telling the truth, Your Honor. Let's assume Mr. Voss is financially solvent and has been hoarding cash to pay for secret insurance policies while pretending to be broke. Under the 2018 divorce decree, Mr. Voss was ordered to pay $800 a month in child support. He hasn't paid a single month in 8 years. If he is solvent today, he owes my client $76,800 in arrears. Immediately, Judge Halverson leaned forward over the bench, glaring down at David. Mr. Voss, did you or did you not commit wire fraud to fund those policies? Aye, David stammered, his expensive suit suddenly looking suffocating. Before David could answer, the courtroom doors banged open. Everyone turned. A man in a sharp gray suit walked in, carrying a leather briefcase. It was the driver from Marcus Kellner's Lincoln Navigator. He ignored the bailiff, walked straight past the gallery where my father was sitting, and approached the wooden railing. Excuse me, Your Honor, the man said, his voice calm and authoritative. My name is Thomas Vance. I am general counsel for Kellner Enterprises. Eleanor Vance turned completely white. Thomas? She whispered. The man looked at David's high-priced lawyer. Hello, Eleanor. It's been a while. He turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption, but I am here on behalf of Marcus Kellner. 10 minutes ago, Mr. Kellner officially acquired the law firm of Aris and Thorne in a hostile buyout. The judge blinked. He bought the law firm representing the petitioner? He bought the entire firm, yes, Thomas said smoothly, which means Eleanor Vance is now an employee of Kellner Enterprises. And as her superior, I am officially instructing her to withdraw this fraudulent, malicious petition for custody immediately, as her client, Miss Voss, has been lying to this court. David stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You can't do that. I'm paying you. He yelled at Eleanor. Eleanor Vance looked at the man from Kellner Enterprises, then down at her files. She slowly began packing her briefcase. I withdraw, Your Honor, she said quietly. I no longer represent Mr. Voss. Wait, David shouted, looking around the room wildly. He pointed at my father. Conrad, call Duncan. Tell him to fix this. My father shrank back into the wooden bench, looking away. I stood up and walked over to David. He was taller than me, but in that moment, he looked like nothing more than a frightened child. Duncan isn't coming to save you, David, I said softly. Duncan is going to federal prison, and you just confessed to wire fraud on a court transcript. I turned my back on him and walked toward the exit, my heels clicking sharply against the floorboards. But as I reached the heavy wooden doors, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Detective Garrett. Emily, don't go back to Kellner's house. I just reviewed the security footage from the storage facility last night. Duncan Reed didn't leave after you did. He waited 10 minutes, then made a phone call. We just pinged the burner phone he called. The signal is transmitting from inside Marcus Kellner's private estate. I shoved the phone into Silas's chest. He stumbled back a step, catching the device before it hit the floor, his eyes scanning Garrett's text. All the color drained from his face. Thomas, Silas barked, his voice cracking slightly as it echoed down the marble corridor. Thomas Vance stopped walking and turned around. Silas handed him the phone. The general counsel of Kellner Enterprises read the message in less than 2 seconds. He didn't panic, he didn't shout. He simply pulled a sleek black phone from his breast pocket and hit a single speed dial button. Marcus, Thomas said quietly. Duncan just pinged a burner on your grounds. Is the boy with you? A pause. Keep him in the library. Sweep the staff. Check the transit driver first. Thomas hung up and looked at me. My car is downstairs. We are leaving right now. The drive back to the northern suburbs was the longest 40 minutes of my life. Silas sat next to me in the back seat, running through legal contingencies under his breath, but I wasn't listening. I was staring at the speedometer, my fingernails digging into my palms so hard they drew blood. If Duncan had touched my son. If my family's greed had finally put hands on the one thing I loved in this world. When we finally pulled through the wrought iron gates of the Kellner estate, there were no police cars. There were no ambulances. The massive stone driveway was completely silent, save for 2 of Marcus's private security men standing by the front doors. I didn't wait for Thomas to open my door. I practically tore it off the hinges, sprinting up the stone steps and through the heavy oak doors. Max, I screamed, my voice tearing my throat. In here, Emily. Marcus called out from the library. I rounded the corner, my heart hammering against my ribs. Max was sitting in the exact same leather chair at the mahogany table, finishing a second glass of milk. He had his tablet propped up and was showing a very patient, very expensive-looking private chef a schematic for a hydraulic claw. He looked up, surprised by my entrance. Mom, you're back already. Did we win? I collapsed to my knees next to his chair, wrapping my arms around his waist and burying my face in his chest. He smelled like grilled cheese and clean cotton. He was entirely safe. He didn't have a scratch on him. Yeah, buddy, I choked out, fighting back a sob. We won. Emily, Marcus said softly. I looked up. Marcus was standing by the massive fireplace at the far end of the room. Sitting in a chair opposite him was the driver who had taken Max and me from the hotel last night. The man was sweating profusely, his tie loosened, staring at the floor. Sitting on the small table between them was a cheap plastic burner phone and a small silver USB flash drive. Your detective friend has good instincts, Marcus said, walking over to the table and picking up the flash drive with a handkerchief. Duncan didn't hire a hitman. He hired a mule. He tracked the GPS on my transit cars last night. He offered my driver $50,000 to slip this into your son's backpack while he was carrying it inside. I stared at the silver drive. What is it? It's a fully encrypted drive containing the unredacted files of every high net worth client Duncan has ever represented, Silas said, stepping into the room behind me. He looked at the driver with absolute disgust. If this had been found in Max's possession, Duncan's narrative would have been complete. He would have told the police you were using your 12-year-old son to smuggle corporate espionage data to avoid being searched yourself. He was trying to put my son in federal lockup to save his own skin, I whispered, the reality of it freezing the blood in my veins. He tried, Marcus corrected, his voice entirely devoid of warmth. But my security sweeps all incoming bad bags for unauthorized RF chips and hidden drives. He was caught the moment he stepped through the service entrance. Marcus looked down at the driver. The police are on their way. I suggest you tell them exactly who gave you that drive, or my lawyers will make sure you take the fall for the entire data breach. The driver buried his face in his hands and started sobbing. I stood up, holding Max's hand tightly in mine. I looked at Marcus. What happens to Duncan now? Now, Marcus said, looking at his watch. The FBI executes the warrant Thomas drafted on the way over. Duncan Reed goes from a civil liability to a man actively tampering with evidence, bribing witnesses, and attempting to frame a minor for federal crimes. He will be arrested before lunch. And he was. It didn't happen in a courtroom, and it didn't happen in a dark alley. Duncan Reed was arrested at 11:45 a.m. while eating a crab cake salad at the Oakwood Country Club, the exact same club where just 5 days earlier, my brother had thrown his engagement gala on my dime. According to the news reports, Duncan tried to claim executive privilege before an FBI agent quietly placed him in handcuffs and walked him past the entire dining room of his wealthy peers. The collapse of my family followed shortly after, swift and absolute. With Duncan's funds frozen by the federal government, Eleanor Vance officially withdrew her representation of David. Without a high-priced lawyer to shield him, David was dragged back into family court the following week. Judge Halvorson didn't just deny his petition for custody. He held David in contempt for lying under oath about his finances. The state garnished David's wages at the logistics company to begin paying back the $76,000 in child support he owed me. He lost the corporate apartment. He moved back into his studio in the South Loop, entirely broke, having gained absolutely nothing. My mother and Trevor didn't fare much better, faced with the mountain of evidence, the IP logs, the green ledger in the attic, the fraudulent life insurance policies, and Marcus Kellner's bottomless legal resources pressing the district attorney. Their public defenders convinced them to take a plea deal. Diane got 4 years for identity theft and wire fraud. Trevor got 7 for his role in the corporate data breach and the crypto embezzlement. I didn't go to their sentencing hearings. I didn't need to see them in orange jumpsuits to feel validated. They had made their choices, and they were finally paying the bill. My father tried to call me once, about a month after they were locked up. He left a voicemail, his voice sounding thin and incredibly old. He told me he was moving into a 1-bedroom apartment near the prison so he could visit Diane on weekends. He asked if I could send him a few $100s to help with a security deposit. He said families should look out for each other. I deleted the voicemail, blocked his number, and threw the phone on the couch. Who was that? Max asked, walking into the living room of our new apartment. It was a beautiful place. 2 bedrooms, massive windows overlooking the lake, and a real office for me. After the dust settled with Duncan's arrest, Marcus Kellner hadn't just paid for my legal defense. He had offered me a job as the director of compliance for Kellner Enterprises. He said anyone who could outsmart Duncan Reed and survive a family of financial parasites was exactly the kind of person he wanted auditing his books. The starting salary was triple what I had made as a paralegal. Nobody important, I said, smiling at my son. Max was carrying his gold robotics trophy. He walked over to the built-in bookshelves by the window and carefully set it right in the center of the middle shelf, adjusting it until it was perfectly straight. He stepped back, admiring it. He didn't look invisible anymore. He didn't try to shrink himself down. He stood tall, completely at home, in a space that belonged only to us. Looks good there, I told him. Yeah, Max agreed, turning to look out at the water. It really does. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee. My phone sat perfectly silent on the granite counter. No demands for money, no fake emergencies, no panic. Just the quiet, steady rhythm of a life I had finally stopped letting them steal.